FinTank. All right, next up, I know y'all want to know this next panel, and it's about how to make money investing in cryptocurrency. Dave Carmen, bring your panel down.
Okay. How many of you are currently trading or investing in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency? All right, pretty good. Okay. All right, well, by the time this panel is done, you're going to be making a lot more money, okay? Okay. All right, so why don't we first do some introductions. To my immediate left is Vic Pascucci, and Vic is in charge of FinTech investing at Lightbank. Vic's been investing in FinTech for about the last 17 years, and he's been singled out in a book as one of the top corporate VCs in the country. How many people here for the Lightbank? Not that many. How many people for the Groupon? Well, that's kind of like their venture division, and they've been knocking the ball out of the park. Okay. And to his left, we have Scott Diamond. Scott's with Ronan Partners. They're a consulting firm in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. And Scott is a rabid Bitcoin enthusiast. And to his left, we have Bobby Cho. Bobby runs the over-the-counter trading desk in cryptocurrencies at DRW, and it's probably the largest over-the-counter trading desk in the world. And then to his left, we have Mike Mollett, and Mike is director of the Futures Exchange at the CBOE, and he's the main guy in charge of launching trading Bitcoin futures. So welcome, guys. Thanks for coming. So first, I'd like to have everybody kind of talk a little bit about just their personal perspective, what you guys are up to activity-wise, and just how you see what's happening in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Vic, you want to go first?
Sure. I'll probably start with just some historical perspective. So I was originally one of the largest corporate investors in Coinbase in 2013 and 2014. I was briefly on the board of advisors there, and that thing Fidelity's doing now, we did at my last fund I managed about 3 years ago, where we implemented their capabilities into a mainstream commercial wallet. So I've been involved in the area since about then. I've been working within financial services for about 20 years and actively investing in venture capital along that way. We have a concentrated effort around blockchain, around the currencies as well.
And could you tell us a little bit about how you're looking at the investment landscape right now in both blockchain and cryptocurrencies? What are you guys up to without violating any confidentiality?
So we'll look at everything from that traditional Lightbank perspective. For us, we're going to focus on entrepreneurs. So it's got to be a great entrepreneur that's looking to create something truly enduring, game-changing, with a long-term viable value proposition. So within the currencies, I'm not seeing tons there, or tons that I would put our money behind. Within the blockchain companies, we're seeing no different than those of us that were investing in internet-based businesses in the late 90s, and we're here in March of 2000 and saw what happened. I'm seeing a lot of those same behaviors with people that don't understand the space, don't understand the technologies, don't understand that for any of this thing to work and be pervasive, that these technologies have to be used, and we have to change the way financial services work because of that. So very few people understand that, and they're in here trying to make a quick buck, and it's the new hot thing, and so we've got to put money to work, and I think that's creating a lot of bad behaviors. I think within Chicago, we've got some great examples of companies that have their heads on straight and are trying to do some great game-changing things. I think the team from Block was on a panel earlier there. Big fan of Matt's and Jeff's and what they're doing, and I think that's a great example of the good that's happening around here as well.
Okay, thanks, Vic. Scott, could you start by just talking about how you got into Bitcoin and what you're doing nowadays with Ronan Partners?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of the only civilian up here, in a way, because I came to cryptocurrency by just being interested in it and reading about it on nights and weekends. My previous life was working as a healthcare recruiting with a healthcare recruiting company. So my nights and weekends turned into very late nights and very long weekends, and I started learning the language, which gave me confidence to start executing and participating in this space, and that goes back to about 2014. So I started getting aggressive in 2015, and of course this year happened, and the people that have been laughing at me for the last 3 years all want to talk to me, which is great, and now I'm seeing opportunities professionally in order to be able to teach and educate executive education here in Chicago and really around the country, because it's going to take a long time for people to learn this language, to become fluent in this language, in order to then have confidence to be able to start accepting the truths that I think the 4 of us, 5 of us up here currently believe.
So if somebody were to start from scratch, how many people are kind of beginners here in the space? Or a few? So let's say you're a beginner. What's the best way to really start preparing yourself if you want to eventually trade or invest in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is you need to take your first world financial brain and put it on a shelf. You have to give birth to a second financial brain and then populate it with the language of this technology. And a lot of that is just going to be an individual pursuit. There's a lot of stuff online, a lot of great videos, and a lot of bad videos, YouTube, where you can kind of start getting self-educated. I do tell people, if you do want to get involved in this space, the best thing to do is go back to grade school and remember the buddy system. Find a buddy. Find 2 buddies, find 3 buddies, and collectively try to learn together. And then as you start executing in this space, you can trade between your accounts, you can send transactions, and you can get over that initial fear factor that everybody, I think, has in this space the first time you send a transaction to a 24-string address, and it's now out of your account, and you have no clue if you're ever going to see it again. So, again, find people who are kindred spirits, coworkers, family, friends, whatever it may be. I think learning collectively is a good way, because that's when you're going to start seeing contradictions in the terms that you're learning, and then you can start vetting out what the truth is.
And how long did it take you to get up to speed where you felt confident to start investing or trading into Bitcoin?
For me, it probably only took about 3 months to start buying, but I was also using very small amounts, very much at-risk capital, money that I didn't mind never seeing again. I'm a buy and a hold type of person with all of my personal assets, plainly because I don't have the appetite to start margin trading and getting too cute with this technology. Because I see the value in these protocol base layers is good enough for me. So I just want to get smart about the security of it, how to own the coin, how to hold the coins, and just get more and more confidence as this is a kind of a repeating echo chamber that we're into right now in this exciting year of 2017.
Great. And Bobby, you're with Cumberland Mining, which is owned by DRW, and you run the biggest over-the-counter trading desk in Bitcoin, I think, in the world, right?
Yeah, we'd like to think so. I guess brief primer. Cumberland Mining is the crypto arm of DRW Trading. So DRW runs a bunch of different businesses, whether it's venture capital, real estate, their traditional business, and also crypto since 2014. So we basically run about 4 different business units within Cumberland. The main being kind of our core-to-core day-to-day day trading, which consists of large over-the-counter trades that we do with known counterparties to Cumberland. And then off the back of that, we also run algorithmic strategies on different exchanges that's automated, and we run that from London hours all the way to US hours. And then to be able to trade large sizes that we do, we have to run a portfolio. So we manage a portfolio of a number of different cryptos, because obviously we have to have inventory in order to satisfy counterparty requests for different trades. Then off the back of that, we do run an enterprise mining operation somewhere in the US. To put it that way, it's near favorable hydroelectric power. And then the last thing is we do run an opportunities fund. So we've invested in companies in the space such as Bitfury, CoinFloor, Simplex. So those are kind of pure equity deals that we've done. We've looked at different ICOs. I'd be hard-pressed to say that we've invested in any more than 5 ICOs, although we've looked at hundreds over the past few months, mainly because the valuations just didn't make sense to us. And so those are kind of the 4 things that we do at Cumberland.
Now, I've read where back in 2015, your firm participated in an auction for Bitcoin, and you guys walked away with 27,000 Bitcoin. Can you share with the audience how many Bitcoin you guys own today?
So we're pretty, as a principal trading firm, right, all these trades that we do are with our own capital for our own risk. We basically manage partner money at DRW. We have been very selective about the data and information that we reveal to the outside world. But the one thing we did reveal earlier this year is that through the United States Marshals auctions, I think there were 4 of them in 2015 and 2016, it was about 140,000 Bitcoins. We won and bid on about 70,000. And so we roughly won half of those 4 series of auctions.
70,000 Bitcoin?
Yes, that is the one stat we can put out there, is yes.
And what's the price today?
Right around 4,800.
So figure rounded off at 7 times 5, that's about what, $35,000?
It's a little bit higher than that, but yeah.
Okay, impressive. Okay, great. And Mike, you're with the CBOE, and you guys are making a big move here to start trading Bitcoin futures. Can you kind of share your thought process and how it came to be?
Sure. So we started looking at Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general a couple of years ago. You know, we talked to a lot of different participants in the market, mostly on the exchange side, you know, the cryptocurrency exchange side, just trying to get a sense of if there was an opportunity there from a derivatives perspective. And then about a year ago, we announced a merger with another exchange, BATS, which had a strong relationship with the Gemini team out of New York. We'd previously had some discussions with them, but we got to know them a lot better through our counterparts at BATS. And they were going through the process of trying to get approval for an ETF from the SEC. When that was disallowed, the SEC gave somewhat of a roadmap for trying to move forward with an ETF related to Bitcoin. And we had the requisite pieces to try and take that up. And because it was something that we'd been looking at anyway, we said, okay, we think this is seems like a pretty good time. We saw all of the interest around the coin ETF. And I have to say, since we've announced our partnership on creating derivatives with the Gemini team, and you know, we've been discussing a product with the CFTC, I mean, the level of interest has just been overwhelming. I think if it even sounds credible, we probably underestimated what the level of interest is out there in Bitcoin derivatives. So. We're excited about the prospects going forward. You know, there are still a lot of steps that need to be taken before we launch something. But you know, despite all the naysayers, it really feels like there's an appetite for participating in the derivative markets around cryptocurrencies.
Can you share who you think some of the bigger players are going to be, or is that kind of confidential at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly wouldn't be able to name names, but you know, we've had interest ranging from, you know, at a retail level, which you would expect, people who just aren't really comfortable yet with the idea of holding a wallet, you know, custody questions around Bitcoin, people that haven't taken the steps that Scott, you know, outlined a few minutes ago, all the way up to large institutional players, you know, some of whom are probably, you know, talking with Bobby's group today, but, you know, even guys that maybe haven't gone that far, but in a structure that they're familiar with, you know, a regulated futures contract, they're much more at ease to say, okay, this allows me to dip my toe into this market. Certainly, you've got the people that are, you know, not believers in Bitcoin that want the opportunity to short the market, but it certainly feels like there are just as many that are out there saying, you know, wow, we think this thing could be incredible. So,
if things go your way, what do you think the landscape will look like a year from now? Any idea?
We learned a long time ago not to predict try to predict where things are going to go with stuff like that. So, you know, the best that we could say is hopefully we have a liquid, deep market in Bitcoin futures, and that everybody who's in the room that has an interest has the ability to express their opinion in the price of Bitcoin.
Can you share that if things go well with the futures, that you guys have plans to then add options, or that's be confidential?
At this point, our focus is just on the futures, right? You know, we're still working with the CFTC on the product proposal we have in front of them, and options will come, but we're not going to put a time frame on it.
Now, you partner with Gemini, and that's because you need their data in order to facilitate the trading?
Not exactly. Really, our partnership with them is more around settling the contract. So, you know, there are a couple of ways that you could go about it. You could try settling to an index, which would be a price of, from multiple exchanges. We chose to work with Gemini simply because they had embraced much more of a regulatory framework than pretty much any of the other exchanges we talked to. They looked a lot more like us, and that was important to us, not only because Bitcoin can have, as everybody's aware, can have a little bit of an iffy reputation, but just because we felt their the efforts they had put behind this, gave credibility to the trading that was going on their exchange. Not to say that the other exchanges aren't, but when it comes down to actually settling a contract, there is some, reputational risk to an exchange and to a clearinghouse, and so, those factors were really important in looking at Gemini.
And Gemini is owned by who?
So Gemini is actually a New York trust company, and the founders of Gemini are Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, who you may know from Facebook.
Everybody recommend Winklevoss Brothers. Everybody see the Social Network movie? They're the owners of Gemini. So, okay. So Vic, I want to go back to you. You mentioned block. What are you looking at any specific themes within blockchain in terms of your investment?
Where I'm looking more thematically is what are the right teams that are going to use blockchain to bring the efficiencies to financial services where the incumbents have completely failed to serve the interests of consumers. And so those of us that work within financial services understand the inefficiencies and within the system and just the utter waste, which translates to bad consumer products and bad consumer prices and bad consumer experiences. That's not going to change unless startups and lots of the folks in this room start businesses to change those things. And so I like looking at those financial services-based technology startups that understand how financial services work, number one, and what the efficiencies that can be brought to take it any way you want, banking, insurance, investment management, securities, and what we're going to do to create more efficiencies and better products that truly serve the needs of all demographics across the globe, the unserved, the underserved, and the overserved from financial services. Most of you have, or some of you I've worked with understand my whole thesis around how financial services have failed to serve the needs of communities everywhere. And it's the very fabric of society. And so unless we take these technologies and change the way these things work, it's just not going to live up.
Can you share how many deals you're seeing now in the blockchain space?
Pure blockchain plays, probably, I don't know, 20 a week probably come in.
20 a week, so about 1,000
Yeah.
a year.
Yeah, that feels about right. That feels about
How many of those have you seen here in Chicago?
Not many. Not many. Two that I'm looking at right now that I'm like not looking at the other stuff that comes in and focusing on those two to try to put some focus on it. So I'm trying to see some things there.
Can you share you're looking more like out to the West Coast, East Coast, overseas, or just all over the place?
It's all over the place, but for me it's a quick vetting process. Like I look at the team, it takes me like 1/10 of a second to know, do they understand financial services? Do they understand the value prop for all the stakeholders? Do they understand what needs to be done here? So I quickly kind of dissect through those.
You mentioned block. Are there any of the firms that you think are kind of cutting edge right now in the blockchain space?
I mean, you've got the people that everyone's probably already talked about today that they've been well funded and are out there doing some great things. You've got Chain, you've got Circle, you've got Bitfury. I mean, lots of people doing great things. My old portfolio companies, Coinbase, the stuff that their engineers are starting on the side and all the stuff they're saying, it's just some amazing things. But it's early. I mean, it's really, really, really early. So you have to be patient, you have to be long. You, as a venture capitalist, you almost have to be willing to live outside of your fund life cycle to understand the full maturity of these things and the full power of them.
Well, let me ask a question to you three guys, because you're kind of all in the cryptocurrency now. I think you've heard Jamie Dimon's remarks about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. It's a fraud. It's going to implode. He compares it to the Tulip Bowl mania. Your thoughts on that? Do you think Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies are here to stay, or do you think there's a possibility Jamie Dimon could be right?
All right, I'll take a stab. I guess I can only talk from my experience. So I'd be hard pressed to think that Jamie has ever sent Bitcoin, received Bitcoin, or ever managed a wallet. Because for me, when we got involved in 2012, so I started my career, spent about 7 years at a company called Second Market, which was then bought by NASDAQ, and then that turned into something called Digital Currency Group. Well, the first exercise we did when we decided to get into Bitcoin was every employee got 2 Bitcoins. Obviously, they're worth a lot more today, but the idea was you spend one and you learn how to save one. So it made every employee create a wallet, made every employee send Bitcoin and receive Bitcoin. And it was really through that practice that was kind of like the aha moment for me. Mainly because of just like the frictionless nature of being able to send, and I don't look at it as money, right? But being able to send value across the internet. So then that starts to unlock other things, right? In terms of other companies looking to create or send different types of value attached to a token or attached to Bitcoin or something
I think
like
that's so hugely important, what you said, that everyone overlooks, the difference between currency
Yep.
and stored value.
Yeah.
And what the
it's-
potential is. And no one talks about it, and it doesn't get a lot of attention, but to me, that goes to the core of probably what you guys are doing.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of people obviously see the numbers and see the price, but really for me, it just boils down to this simple idea of being able to send value peer-to-peer across the internet to anybody around the world, fast and frictionless. But so back to, I guess, Jamie Dimon's comments. Look, everybody's entitled to their opinions, but anybody that's actually used it, I think they see real value in it. They may not see $4,800 value in it, but I think with the number of transactions that you see on the network every single day, there is some internal valuation of what it is. In terms of it being a tulip, a lot of people will spin that and say, well, gold can be looked at the same way. It just may have a longer horizon than tulips. Bitcoin maybe could be the same way as well. But I think the concept of this idea of cryptographic transactions that are on a public ledger are here to stay, but it may not be Bitcoin, but it may be something else in the future.
Did you have a lot of skepticism before you first started practicing and using it?
Absolutely. I was a meeting principal there. I traded fixed income, and then lo and behold, we get this meeting, and this is 2012, where they're like, hey, we want to trade Bitcoin. And at that time, the only thing online about Bitcoin was the white paper and just a few forums and bulletin boards that's not where you go to get information. But in this community, that's where it kind of grew out of, this grassroots environment of someone picking up the open source technology, then building on top of it. So I think that was really critical for me.
Scott, Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Bobby. I don't think that, Diamond's comments were clearly pretty, over the top or whatnot. But, from the exchange perspective, our CEO, Ed Tilley, made the comment, that makes a market, right? You're exactly right. It may not be worth $4,800. It might be worth $9,600. It might be worth $1,200. We don't know. We're just providing people a forum for expressing those opinions, and and then there is utility beyond that. We do think that it's supportive of the cash market and helps facilitate more transactional opportunities around Bitcoin, whether you're a miner, whether you're a payment processor in Bitcoin. Having derivatives markets would allow those people to hedge their exposures, and as a result, they can expand and take some of the risk off the table for themselves. So, they're hyperbolic, but I don't think that it really is going to have much impact on whether or not people view Bitcoin going forward as a valid store of value or currency or anything like that.
Scott, any thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to point out that I spell my name differently than him. I'm not related to him by any stretch. It's something to keep in mind. Crypto journalism is pretty brutal. It's gotten better, but those comments came during a conference call where he had to report some pretty bad numbers to his shareholders. And given the language that he was using was very un-CEO-esque, I would say that he was probably more frustrated with other things, and it just manifested himself in those comments. So, but to the purpose, or to the core of the comments, I completely think he's wrong. And one of the things to understand too is that as you start learning is that Bitcoin is actually kind of a really bad name because it's taking a physical property of a coin and trying to conceptualize it and make it virtual. all Bitcoin is a collection of 100 million subparts of programmable stores of value. So you take 100 million of those together, and then you just call it a Bitcoin. But all the exciting things that are coming out of this is the use cases as they start coming out, from cross-border remittances, where a Bangladeshi migrant worker in Saudi Arabia can send money home without losing 30% of its value through fees and transaction fees and network fees, and can do it instantly. That's going to happen. Cross-border remittances is already a great use case. Microtransactions, as soon as the community is able to get their arms around the scaling issues, which is going to affect every single coin at some point, the idea of being able to stream value and stream money is going to produce new financial products that can't even be dreamed of. I always tell people how cool it would be if your children can pay their mortgage once every 60 seconds instead of once a month. These things are possible, and the entrepreneurs out there are going to add more value to this network as time goes on. So I think he's very wrong.
Okay. Vic, earlier today, Kai Wu of Morningstar talked about the difference between private blockchains and public blockchains and how difficult it is to build a public blockchain. Do you see any promising developments that we might be seeing a public blockchain in the not so distant future? Or do you think that's kind of still far ahead?
I'm not an advocate of private blockchains. I think it ruins the core of what blockchain is, right? You might as well just set up a VPN, right? The power is in the decentralization. It's in the ability to bring the token offerings and the asset tracking and those types of things. So I could be wrong on this, but I don't think there's any hope for private blockchains. I think the power of the technology is in its decentralized nature. And it's that decentralized nature that enables it to become a currency, a store of value. Now, I've been wrong in the past when I was in 2012, 2013 as the biggest zealot out there saying Bitcoin's a currency and we're going to change the world and everyone should, I don't care if you hold, you have to transact. Right, by today's standards, I think I paid for like a $6,000 barbecue lunch in Austin, Texas, based on the price of where Bitcoin is now versus what I paid for it then, and a $72 cup of coffee. So obviously missed that one with where things are at now. So you can't really take, these things are evolving and they're new. And I think, you've got to understand that, like we were talking about earlier, you've got to geek out on the stuff for a while. Like sit down with the Satoshi paper for a couple days, right? Understand what this thing is really about. And if you stay kind of true to its nature and the decentralized power, then you'll understand that, okay, if we try to treat it like it's mainframe technology, it's not going to work. If we try to treat it like it's a private network, it's not going to work. Because we have private networks out there that are really good, and they already operate at Visa level scale, and so you don't need this, right? So that's why I have a lot of faith in entrepreneurs. I have a lot of faith in the Moore's law of technology that we will solve all these scaling issues, and the technologies are there.
Do you see anybody leading the way in the development of a public blockchain?
It's not the consortiums, and it's not the large technology providers. It's going to be, the people I see that I like. It's the grassroots efforts. It's the entrepreneurs. It's the startups. It's the people that don't have those. They're well informed about the technology. They're well informed about the industry. They're trying to use the technology to bring the efficiencies to, but they're not hampered by the blinders of working inside a large organization, or worse yet, trying to get 10 companies that have never worked together successfully in the past together to agree on one of the most game-changing technologies that we've seen.
Mike, a question for you. How is the regulatory environment for what you guys are trying to launch here with the Bitcoin Futures? Do you see regulation kind of limiting the opportunity in what you're doing, or do you think they're playing, pretty fair?
Oh, I would definitely say they've been fair. The CFTC's already approved, 2 exchanges to offer Bitcoin transactions on the option side, not anything on the future side yet. The SEC, we mentioned the ETFs. They haven't approved anything in that space yet, and they recently had requested that several people withdraw their filings. But that was based on those ETF product filings were based on using derivatives on Bitcoin like futures, and mean, the SEC's logic on that was sound, right? I mean, hey, those products don't exist yet. There's no reason for you to be filing ETFs. We think that our interaction with the CFTC on this has been, it's been very good. They've been, really receptive to what we've been discussing with them and responsive. And it's a learning process for these guys as well, though, right? I mean, this stuff is new, and so they want to take their time, make sure that they understand, what the product offerings are, so that they have some public responsibility and trust in their hands, right? So they want to make sure that they've done their due diligence before they sign off on any ideas.
Do you see any competition right now with what you're doing? Or I know the Ledger Exchange in Miami is going to start trading Bitcoin futures too. I've heard rumors there was going to be another exchange pop up here in Chicago. Any thoughts on competition at all?
Not really. I mean, the idea is, not unique to us, certainly. So, competition's healthy in markets, and to the extent that there are other people that have different ideas or, want to compete based on, some idea that's going to differentiate them, we're open to that.
Take a few questions.
Let me ask Scott and Bobby, China's trying to digitize its currency. Do you see the Federal Reserve Bank here in the States doing the same?
All right, you're going to hear quite a bit about this, I think, over the next coming years. Any central government's attempt at trying to do their own cryptocurrency is going to crash in flames and burn. Nobody's going to want to use it once more people start really understanding the power of a decentralized ledger system. Do you really want the federal government to have complete control over, at least today when they have to print money, they have to actually buy paper and nickel. If you could just go to a keyboard and just start creating cryptocurrency out of thin air, which you can do when it's your system, you've got just as many issues as the current fiat monetary policy in every individual country. Not only that, but how would you like to wake up on April 16th to a text message from the US government saying they just took 20% out of your account and you don't have to file your taxes this year? Thank you very much. So there's a lot of really scary stuff out there, and I think once more people understand it, I would never buy USA coin or anything along those lines or participate in the ecosystem. I do think, though, is when they do attempt to do it, because the desire is going to be so strong to do it, it's just going to drive more people into the arms of Bitcoin.
Okay, let's just take a few questions from, yes, question.
Directly along those lines, and perhaps for Mike and Bobby, last week Christine Lagarde made some comments about the IMF SDR instrument as possibly a vehicle for a decentralized of sorts cryptocurrency. Any thoughts on where that drives any of this discussion?
I mean, I think statements like that kind of validate the strong points of cryptocurrencies, right? Vic had mentioned kind of the decentralized nature, right? It's not like, for me, it's not the issuer and how they put things together, right? It's really the economics of a cryptocurrency and how that all meshes together. And Bitcoin, by chance, just happens to have this kind of beautiful arrangement of incentives, economics, and also just the ability to kind of join the network and use it. So that's all kind of married together. And so taking apart those pieces and applying that to something else, I think just further educates people and further moves along this idea of decentralized, peer-to-peer, and that kind of theme.
Regardless of what the largest banks in the world think about Bitcoin, who has the final say? FINRA, SEC, lawyers, at the end of the day, to give a blessing after we have kind of proven that it works and we have built something safe? And is there a body out there besides the federal government that's going to give a blessing and go, guess what? This is an approved type of currency, and now we can start trading it.
I guess I'll take that. So Bobby used the word beautiful, and one of the more beautiful aspects of Bitcoin is the anonymity of the creator. You can't sue Bitcoin because there is no place to deliver deliver anything to. There's no address, there's no physical address, there's no owner of Bitcoin, there's no creative team that is individually responsible for the network itself. And because it is borderless and because it is permissionless, you can't stop people from opting in or opting out unless you shut down the internet globally and eliminate the power supply, or you turn off all the electricity. So if you do that, you're going to have bigger problems.
Yeah, the same thing that created it will be the same thing that validates it. I mean, the bare fact fundamentals are a currency got created absent a government. Period. Right? And that's never happened before. And everyone doubted that it could happen. And we're at a scale right now where it's proven. It is secure. It's more secure than the payment credentials we send around every day when we use Apple Pay. Just some of you are in financial institutions, talk to your fraud teams. Like, they freak out. So it's more secure. The same way, you'll always have bad actors in any type of value transaction. Those bad actors have no more or less ability to defraud things in Bitcoin than anything else. I would say less. So what's going to validate and authenticate it isn't going to be any governmental body, right? You're going to see, and we are seeing, right, the CBOEs, the Fidelities, the Goldmans, the DRWs. It's going, right? And everyone's just going to be like, okay, this is just part of the system. Now how do we play?
Yeah, but aren't they, the people you just listed, which are all banks and reputable, aren't they under the rules of SEC and FINRA and all that? Because the belief is the people we see in front of us, but there's people obviously in the world that do not believe in this. And that's what I'm trying to get at. At the end of the day, what topic will be there to say, I don't care what Mr. Diamond says, this is going to work, and this is the reason why it's going to work.
Well, I think that's already happening, though, right? Bitcoin has been categorized as an exempt commodity, which means it falls under the jurisdiction of the CFTC, which is why they've already approved 2 exchanges, which is why we're working with them to try and get approval for a futures contract. Once that process really gets started, and if there is adoption of a futures contract around that, then other agencies, I think, sort of fall in line with the concept because they know the playbook from there, right? I mean, they've seen it happen with other assets and other products. I think that the issue right now is really just one of self-education on their part and understanding something that's new. And I don't want to characterize it as risky because that's not what the CFTC or anyone is doing in reviewing these, but they need to be cautious and they need to be thorough. And so once that process is played through, I think again, if there is widespread adoption, then I think it's going to actually spread very quickly.
Thank you. Yes.
So, one of the big interests in cryptocurrency, especially just coming out with the price, right? $48 right now. And the panel speculated as to why the prices are not so high, for one. And number two, what do they predict for the future as to these prices?
I mean, I'll just take a stab, right? So I think we all agree that it's fairly early in the crypto world, especially in the Bitcoin world, right? We still have issues with scalability. There's a lot of like homegrown issues that are still at play. Yet people believe it enough to be able to place a bid out there and buy it at $4,800. Well, let's just boil down the utility, right? So there are people that are using it for transactions right now. It may not be to the scale that people would like it to be, but I think BitPay came out with some stats last week saying that this year they're on pace to do $1 billion in Bitcoin sales or transactions. There's some value there. Every month retailers are doing over $100 million in Bitcoin sales. Then there's this idea of store of value, right? So that's using it as a currency to buy something. Well, the store of value, right, is this idea that I can have a Swiss bank account on my phone. So think about the profile of new investors in this space, people who are, I guess, around my age, a little bit younger, a little bit older. Well, you ask them, well, how many of you guys own gold? Probably not many are going to say they own gold. And then you ask, well, how many of you guys own cryptocurrencies? I think you'll get a lot more folks raising their hands, mainly because it's actually more tangible to them than gold. And so the profile of the investor is shifting, and it's going to continue to shift. That's why you see banks and financial services starting to target those types of folks. And so if you have this idea that, okay, the mindset of the investor is going to change, the utility is going to continue to grow, well, then you got to imagine that the price of Bitcoin is going to be a lot higher than $4,800. So you are basically paying for the future value that you inherently have in your mind of what Bitcoin should be or could be.
Any more questions? Yes.
So can you speculate on the split in the network of Bitcoin Cash, potential upcoming split, that's going to happen again in October?
Yeah.
Do you think that's what the adoption of value?
Yeah, that's a pretty deep question, probably even for this audience. I'm actually staying back here for as long as anybody else wants to stay here to ask more questions. But yeah, it's a good one, and it's worthwhile of an answer, but it would be a long answer.
Yeah, and that one, I think, gets to the core philosophical issues. I mean, you've got your hardcore zealots that are like, we have to keep the purity of the block, and we have to understand the distribution amongst the miners. And so there's just deep philosophical issues, and you've got all different types of groups that are centering around it. And once you peel back the onion on those groups, you just have to see what their self-interest is and why they want to do it and where this thing needs to go.
Okay, with that, how about a hand for our panel?